People have strong feelings about rehoming pets, and most people have strong feelings whether it be sometimes things happen and you have to do it, and it should never happen. Once you get a pet, that is your pet for life, and it is the equivalent to a human child. I'm on this side. Sometimes things happen. Do I think that people get pets without thinking ahead and then it's just easy to just get rid of them? Yes. I saw this thing on Facebook that was posted by a rescue, like an animal rescue, and I have my thoughts about it, and I also want to share my story of how I once rehomed my dog and what circumstances led up to it and why sometimes things change, and the best thing for the dog and the humans is for the dog to go to a better home. And that'll be after I read you what was on that page and give you my thoughts about it. So Friends for Life shared this. This is Caroline. She moved overseas with all her animals. She never wrote on Facebook, "I'm giving up my cats and dogs because I'm moving," or "I'm having a baby," or "I've had the animal a year, 2 years, or more, and now I suddenly don't have the time for it and can't afford to feed it." So when you get an animal, remember that it's a fragile creature, part of the family, and must follow you everywhere you go. Otherwise, don't get one. Be like Caroline. We have no way to know if Caroline is real and if this is a true story, but it very well might be. Like, people do it all the time. But just because that worked for Caroline does not mean that works for everyone. So here's my story about my sweet Foxy and how I still miss her to this day, but it truly works out for everybody involved. So my kid's dad and I were just two hardworking adults who decided we wanted to add a puppy to our lives. We started looking at different rescues and what we were going to do to get said puppy. Well, all while this was happening, he developed vertigo at work. They sent him to get tested for drugs and alcohol because of the way he was acting. They thought for sure he was intoxicated or impaired in some way. Everything came back good, so they were like, "You need to see a doctor and figure out what's going on before you can return to work." So he goes to a primary care. They run tests. Turns out he had what they called an aggressive form of MS. During all this, we decided that a puppy would still be a good idea because I was healthy and it would be a good companion for him throughout the day while I worked. You know, he wasn't in a good place mentally, being taken out of work. And so we went through with getting a puppy. Shortly after that, he finds out that this is an aggressive form of MS. They don't know when or if he will ever go back to work, and they were suggesting that he apply for Social Security disability. Now we are going from a 2-income family to a 1-income family. Still wasn't a big deal. We lived in an apartment. We had a small dog. She did not cost us a lot, right? So it was never a thought in our minds that like this puppy was a problem. She was still the best thing that had happened to us in that moment, obviously, because there was so much going on. 20 days later, we find out that I'm pregnant. Still, never a thought in our mind that we needed to get rid of our puppy. She was the sweetest little thing. We would just raise her and the baby together. While I was off having the baby, she stayed with his grandparents. And his grandmother is just the sweetest human to ever walk this earth, and of course loves animals. And I believe at that time she had recently lost her like 20-something-year-old cat. So it was very nice for her to have Foxy around. After settling in at home for I think a week, we got Foxy back, and her and the baby were doing so good together. When our daughter was about 4 months old, we decided to move closer to where my mom lives, so we moved apartments. And you know, like I said, now we're down. I was the only one making money. I don't know if you know this, but it takes usually on average about 2 years to get approved for Social Security disability. So during that time, we were on my small income as a healthcare worker, which for what I do, you don't make a whole lot, okay? At the time, I think I was making like $14-ish an hour, supporting this family of now 3 humans and a dog. But again, still wasn't a problem. But we moved into an apartment complex that wasn't the best, and for some reason it's one of the only ones in our area that accepts certain dog breeds. So it was, and I know everybody has an opinion on this too, but it was literally where every apartment living owner of a pit bull lived, because that's the only apartment that would accept pit bulls. One evening he was walking her and she got attacked by a pit bull. She was unharmed, but she came running into the apartment scared, got her wet paws all over the bed, on everything. And at that point he was like, this is just too much. So even though everything was going good with the baby and the puppy, he was at a point where his medications were failing him and they weren't able to figure out what to put him on to make him stable. So I was waking up at 5 a.m. every day, getting the dog out to go to the bathroom, getting myself and the baby ready for me to go to work and me to drop her off at her babysitter. And it was a lot. So that night he's like, this is just too much. And I knew it was already too much. Like, I was feeling like it was just a hard time for us to have the baby and the puppy and everything going on with his health. And when we moved into that apartment, his grandma had watched Foxy again, but giving her back that second time, she cried because she's like, she brings me so much joy. I'm going to miss her. I love her. And everybody had been saying, like, give her your puppy. And I was like, that's my dog. But after that day, I said, it's time. We took Foxy over to his grandma. I sobbed so much. I want to cry thinking about it. Because I love that dog. I still miss her and I still think about her, and sometimes I feel guilty that we eventually, years down the road, got another dog. But Grandpa ended up passing away a few years later, and now all Grandma has is that dog. And she loves her, and Foxy is living her best life. She is bringing Grandma joy, and so it really, really worked out to be the best situation for everybody involved. So I think that anytime somebody is rehoming a dog, they're not a monster. It's not a bad thing. And sometimes things change. Like, I cannot believe how much my life changed in a span of literally like 3 years, because 2 years after that we had twins. So things change in people's lives and they're not always in control of it. And if the best thing for even the puppy is to find it a better home, like, that's a good thing. I mean, people give their human babies up for adoption, right? Like, but when people give a dog up for adoption, for some reason they're looked at as like monsters. And again, I think some people do get animals and they see them as expendable. I know some people who almost every dog they've gotten, they've rehomed. So it's like, why do you keep doing it? But if it's like an isolated situation, like, if things happen and you don't know everybody's life story and their situation, so don't use somebody else's life as an example for all of us, because whatever this Caroline has, we might not have, whatever resources she has, whatever money she has to move abroad and take 50 animals, we don't all have that. I also think that, especially for a rescue to be sharing that, it shames people to the point where, like, are people not posting that they need to rehome their animal anymore? They're just dumping them in the desert or in a parking lot somewhere because they can't take care of them, but they don't want to be shamed on the internet. Like, you're pushing people away who could be doing the right thing and giving the puppy to, or the dog to, a shelter instead of potentially doing something more harmful. So I think that's also something to think about when it comes to shaming people online for rehoming their pets, because you don't want to shame people away from doing the better option. So if they are going to 100% get rid of this animal, wouldn't you rather them give it to a shelter than just dump it somewhere, or just put it in the hands of somebody who may or may not take care of this dog or potentially abuse it? That's just my thoughts. I don't know. Everybody feels so strongly about it. So let me know what you think in the comments about my thoughts about those situations. Have you ever had to rehome a pet? Do you think it's the worst thing somebody could do? What do you think about my situation? Should we have kept Foxy? Don't say yes, because I think about that all the time. Like, what if we would have just stuck it out? But again, turned out to be the best for everybody. My dogs are barking, so I'm gonna get going. But if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe, come back, because together is a beautiful place to be. Bye.